So you're gonna show where you stretch all those people? So you're gonna show us the dungeon?
I might try to show a move or two.
Yeah. I'll take some moves, sir.
Do you feel that?
Oh, yes, sir. I don't feel my arms, sir. I can feel it.
Can you feel that, sir?
Oh, yes, sir.
Red,
oh, yeah.
Rosy.
Yes, sir.
And by taking this arm back here,
no.
You just ease his hand in the position here. I got the power here to...
Stop it, sir. Stop.
You're listening to Hart Beat Radio.
Good afternoon, the great fans of Hart Beat Radio. Bob Johnson coming to you live from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, from the Hart Beat Radio studios. What a great show we have this afternoon. We have one of the true legends of, and iconic legends of the early 80s. Mr. Magnum TA will be joining us in a couple of minutes. But first of all, I'd like to introduce our co-host for the afternoon, from Portland Wrestling, Mr. Matt Merz. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you, Bob. I am very excited for today's show. We have quite an exceptional guest, and I think there's a lot of people out there listening who are interested in finding out a lot more about this gentleman's career, and that is Magnum TA, Terry Allen. And so I'm looking forward to the show, you know. Let's get Bruce on here and get it started.
I'd like to welcome the host of the show, trainer, wrestler, booker extraordinaire, Mr. Bruce Hart. Welcome back to Hart Beat Radio, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm very appreciative that Magnum has seen fit to join us today, and I used to hear all about him, nothing but good things, I might add, back in the day from a lot of his cronies down in the Carolina, Atlanta area, and he was one of the iconic baby faces in the business back in the 80s. I'm really looking forward to sharing perspectives and hearing some of the stories about his career, you know. So.
Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome one of the true legends, the most popular legend of the iconic stars of the 1980s, wrestled NWA World Champion Ric Flair. He's wrestled countless names in NWA and the Crockett Promotions. One of the really great guys I had a chance to meet Terry at the Dan Gable Museum last July. Unfortunately, his career ended in a car accident. But one thing about Terry, he's a total profile of courage and a great inspiration to others. And but without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to Hart Beat Radio, Mr. Terry Allen.
Well, thank you, guys. After all these kind words, I'd like to just sit back and listen to it myself. I'd like to hear this guy.
And I swear we have no hidden agendas, or we're not blowing smoke for.
No. Thank you. Back in the day, this would have been a good setup if I had the pistol, you know.
Oh yeah, I think back in the day, if people were saying that many nice things about you, you're almost waiting for them to tell you to bend over. You know? Yeah. Something like that, you know.
Yeah, don't move.
But
Well, I want to go back to his high school days. I think Terry grew up in Tidewater, Virginia.
Correct.
And did you play any sports in high school? Did you wrestle at all or anything like that, Terry?
Oh, yeah. I wrestled all 4 years of high school and won the state championship in Virginia in 1977 at 167 pounds. And went on to wrestle at Old Dominion University there in Norfolk my freshman year, again at 167. But my body was changing drastically between like 18 and 19 years old, and trying to keep that weight at 167 and my height was quite a task. So it didn't take long before, as I was maturing and doing some serious weightlifting, that I quickly found myself well over 200 pounds and 167 in my rear view window. And my coaches in college at the time didn't think that there wasn't a weight class that I really fit in, because back then the heavyweights were 250, 260, and I was about 215. So it kind of curbed my goals of continuing on and trying to be a collegiate wrestler. And it's about during that same point in time I was working security in nightclubs in Virginia Beach while I was going to college, and I started seeing the guys come in after matches. It was like Johnny Valentine, not Johnny, but Greg, and Ricky Steamboat, and Ric Flair, and Blackjack Mulligan, and it kind of a light bulb started going off because I'd watched wrestling from the minute I was old enough to remember watching it on television, but I had never really entertained the idea that I'd ever be big enough to think about doing that. And back in 1979, as I was, like I said, going from about 210 to 220 and seeing these guys and hearing about the kind of money that there was there to be made, I saw it all of a sudden as a potential opportunity, something that I might want to try my hand at.
And is that when you kind of fell in with Buzz Sawyer, or how did it all happen?
Well, it all happened like this. I was friends with several of the police officers in Virginia Beach and Norfolk that worked security backstage, and Gene Anderson was backstage at Norfolk Scope, and they brought me back, introduced me to him, and like every up and coming think he should be a wrestler kind of guy, Gene just kind of looked at me like one of those kind of guys. And so Gene said, well, we'll be having some tryouts, blah, 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 and I'll give you a ring when it's going to happen. And so I said, okay. And so I knew nothing about anything as far as how the business worked. I knew it wasn't a straight-up shoot because I came from a world of, amateur wrestling and the school of hard knocks working in nightclubs, so I knew that nobody could physically survive all the things that I was watching them do, but I didn't know how it worked. And so I went down to Charlotte from my home there. I was living in Virginia Beach at the time, and for their quote-unquote tryout. You had to pay $50 to try out. And they put us back there in the sweat box and worked us out for about 45 minutes, and I was blown to the moon from doing squats and push-ups and running and everything imaginable. And then in came the boys, and it was Buzz, and I think Bob Roop was there, and I don't know, it was a half a dozen guys, several guys I didn't know. And I was just blown sky high. And it just, I was too street smart to want to play this game with a bunch of guys that were being, going to be like wise guys, and you're being, I'm in their world, and so we don't really have any, really intention of seeing what a great wrestler you are. We're just going to abuse you and send you home to the tail between your legs. So I went outside and sat down on the hill, and Gene came out there and kind of said, "Oh, you need to come back in here." And I said, "No." I said, "You really don't." I said, "If you wanted to see me wrestle, wrestle like I'm capable of doing," I said, "you would have brought me in here and put me in a ring with somebody and see what I could do. But this isn't the real deal." So I up and left because I was a little ticked off, and I drove back, and so Buzz saw me, and kind of light bulbs went off for him. I think this, might be some opportunity for him to capitalize on, and he kind of took me under his wing and said, "Oh, I'm gonna break you in. I'm gonna, I'll help you. I've got, I got contacts all over the country and in Hawaii and all over the place." So, make a long story short, there was some money changed hands between he and I won't go into how much because it really doesn't matter. But it was all under the intention of him helping me get into business. And about that time, Buzz up and left the territory and went from the Mid-Atlantic out to Portland. But he said, I'm going to get my little brother Brett started. I've got a spot for him in Mid-South. And he said, if you'll go down and pick Brett up in Tampa and drive him over to Mid-South, I'll be working on getting things ready for you to come out here. So I did that. And I drove around with all the guys. That's where I met Jimmy Garvin and the Junkyard Dog and Carl Orndorff and a host of others. But I was definitely not I was in the cars with the guys every night, but I wasn't in the dressing room, and I wasn't in the area where I had to come in contact with Bill Watts or Grizzly. So they kind of kept me under the covers. And this went on for about a month, and I kept calling Buzz, and he kept dodging my calls. And finally one night, I was off with Jimmy Garvin, and him and I just struck off this really unique friendship that we still have to this day. And I told him the whole story of everything going on. He said, what you need to do, because he was from Tampa and he knew Buzz. He said, you need to get in your car and you need to go show up on his doorstep and find out what he's going to do about getting you in the wrestling business. And that's what I did. I packed up. I drove all the way across to Los Angeles, all the way north up to Portland. I had Buzz's address, and I showed up on his doorstep. And Buzz took me down, promptly took me, it was acting like he was so glad to see me, and he took me down to meet Don Owens. And unbeknownst to me, he had told Don that I had been working for Bill. Well, I'd never been a ring one time for nothing, not to help set it up, not to do anything. I didn't know anything about it. But he had told Don that I'd been working for Bill, and Don just took Buzz's word for it, and he booked me. He booked me on television to work my first match with Buzz, and then I was going to be booked the rest of the week. And so Buzz and his little brother, no, what his little brother was, Buzz and I and Princess Victoria, who was a female wrestler up there at the time, all went down to the ring there in Portland on an afternoon and worked out for about 2 hours. And he showed me how to walk around and hit the ropes and grab a headlock and take some bumps. And we worked out a little match. And the next day I worked with him on TV, about a little 8-minute match, and put him over. And the rest was history. I worked every day from then on and learned in the ring from the guys I was working with. I never had a lick of training besides what I got on the job training with those guys in the ring.
And you had quite a variety of guys back there in 1981, you know, with Stan Stasiak. I think Gene Kiniski was down at that time. Matt Bourne, Rip Oliver, Buddy Rose, all those guys were kind of running around in Portland. Do you have any memories of any of those guys?
Oh, yeah, great talents. Well, yeah, all of them. I mean, and the Barbarian he was breaking in at the same time. He was wrestling as Tonga John, and him and I were both rookies. And as green as he was, I was greener than he was, but just nobody else knew it because of the way they depicted the whole situation. But as a matter of fact, Gene, they booked me in a match with Gene Kiniski in Seattle, and I've been in the business about 6 weeks, and I don't know all the lingo, I don't know all the terms. I've done very basic stuff, and like I said, just locking up and, go behinds and this, that, and the other. And poor Gene, they put me out there with Gene, and, I know he's a former world champion. I'm trying to be really respectful. And Gene tells me, he picks me up and drops me behind me, tells me to roll him up. Well, I didn't know what a roll-up was. I didn't know what in the world he was talking about, but when he dropped me behind him, I said, well, I know how to do this, and I belly-to-back suplexed him on his head. and he was such a good sport. I didn't do it like a shoot to try to kill him, but I picked him up he had nothing to do with it, and dropped him, back on his shoulders, and he came to me after the match, and he was laughing. He said, kid, that was an interesting move you put on me there. And I said, well, I didn't want to tell him I didn't know what a roll-up was. But anyway, a lot of guys had a lot of patience with me, and I worked every night for those guys for 6 months, and it was just, an amazing learning curve. I met Andre the Giant for the first time. He came in working the territory and had a great big car, so I ended up driving the Giant around and spent some great time with him. And,
hopefully you didn't have to pay for the beer.
No, he bought the beer. He bought.
Yeah, well, that's good.
It was all good.
Yeah, you would have been out of money if you were picking up the tab for his bar bill or whatever.
Yeah. No, I wasn't making that kind of money to keep up with the Giant drinking. I mean, I just had never seen anything like it. I mean, when I met him, he was on the beer run. The Giant changed from beer for a while, wine for a while, and bounced around different stuff. And he had 3 sips, and he's throwing the beer out the window. I'm going, my gosh, how long is this going to last? It lasted as long as I was driving. Yeah.
Now you've got to have an Elton Owens story, because everybody that wrestled in Portland has an Elton Owens story.
Well, Elton, you like to do the shoot thing. He liked the boys. I remember Matt Bourne and I. One night he came up and Matt was working his babyface too, and he wanted Matt and I to go out and have a 5-minute shoot and then work our match. And they paid you extra. I forgot what it was, $25 or $50 or something if you did the shoot match and you won. And I thought that was pretty cool. But I didn't know that all the boys were working the shoot. Most of the boys were working the shoot and then going into just a regular working style, and then they'd split the money just to make some extra money and get Elton all excited. So yeah, I got to do that. Sandy Barr was there back during that time too. And Lord Jonathan Boyd. It was a colorful crew.
And from there, you kind of went down to Joe Blanchard's promotion, Southwest Championship Wrestling, I believe, and you were only there for maybe 3 or 4 months. Well,
actually, I was there 6 months, and for the life of me, I was thinking about this the other day. I to this day, I don't remember how it happened because I was supposed to go to California. And I was talking back and forth with those guys, and then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm talking to Buck Robley. And I don't even know how Buck got my number. Don't even know how it all happened. But next thing I know, I'm talking to Buck, and Buck was booking for Joe. And he said, yeah, I'd like you to come out here and give you a try. And I said, well, good. And I'd had 6 months worth of work, which if I'd been working in the indie circuit, I guess that'd be like 6 years worth because we worked 7 days a week back then. So that was, I'd had a lot of matches in 6 months, but I was still very green. And I went to work for Joe, and Scott Casey was there, and Hank Patton, and Chavo Guerrero, Manny Fernandez. Good grief for this. The list of folks, just goes on and on. Ivan Putski was in the territory at the time, and Tony Atlas and Bruiser Brody. It was a great group, and that's where I met Tully for the first time, and him and Gino were tag partners, and so it was great. They gave me a great opportunity, and then I was getting to work every night, and I was getting to learn the craft, real time, and put ring time in and everything else. So it was great, experience, which is what a rookie needs, is just ring time. And the guys would talk to you after matches and they show you where there was room for improvement. Manny Fernandez actually went down the ring with me and showed me how to throw a drop kick. I didn't have that in my arsenal at all. And in 5 minutes, he showed me how to throw a drop kick. And so guys were constantly helping perfect, help us along. And it was like myself, Tom Pritchard, I'm trying to think of Ray Hernandez. I was there. We were the rookies of that group at the time, and we were just out there trying to soak it up like a sponge and learn everything we could.
And from there, you went to Championship Wrestling from Florida. Started out in 1982, right? And
right.
Seemed to be there for quite a while.
I did, and that all came about through a chance meeting that I had with Mike Graham. Mike had come into San Antonio, and for like 4 or 5 days of shots, and him and I just hit it off like we'd known each other our entire life. Mike was wrestling that junior heavyweight thing back then, and we had a lot in common. We shared a lot of the same passions for things, and had a lot of fun on top of that. And he went back and told his dad about me. They said, we need to bring this guy to Florida and put some polish on him and take him to the next level. And that's what happened. They gave me the opportunity, brought me in. I was still working at the middle bottom of the card, but I was getting more and more ring time and getting to work with more seasoned people. And Dory Funk Jr. was the booker when I first came in. And so I got to work with Dory, and David Von Erich was in the territory at the time too, and just a lot of guys. And after about 6 months of Dory booking, this interesting guy came in who I'd never met before either, named the American Dream Dusty Rhodes. And the meeting and the friendship that developed between he and I pretty much changed my career and everything, from that moment on.
Was Dusty still working then, or was he strictly booking, Terry?
He was working and booking, and
he's doing that American Dream thing, or the.
Yes, he was the American Dream, and he was had himself booked on top, working the top babyface deal, and we had Barry Windham was there. Barry was, of course, one of the top guys for Dusty because of his relationship with Blackjack from back in the day. So it was real tight.
Yeah, it was all tied in, that Texas thing with even Dickie Murdoch and Dusty were running together late 60s, early 70s, and I think they were supposed to come up for my dad. But yeah, Dusty had a rep as a great mind for the business. Did he impart a lot of that to you? I always used to hear he was had a great idea of how to manipulate and kind of give guys roles and that kind of thing,
Well, he did, and he was a student of Eddie, and Eddie was just a master of psychology. And for my first 6 months there, before Dusty came in, I traveled with Eddie and Mike. And Eddie sat and watched every match I had and talked to me about it afterwards. And then he'd have me stand there with him, and he'd tell me what was good and bad in every match. And he would talk to me about the psychology. Just every single night for 6 months, I did that with Eddie and Mike.
Yeah.
And then
what
Dusty
were some of the things?
Well, Eddie, the big thing he taught me was about selling. He taught me about the difference in registering something and selling it correctly.
Yeah, they used to always use that term, register was...
Yeah, register,
the Mexicans.
Register, sell
sets
or
up
die.
The comeback.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that was almost like the gospel back in the day. You'd have these old farts like Harley or Dick Steinborn or whatever. They'd always over and over and over tell you that the cell sets up the comeback, and no baby faces ever made a dime in this business if they couldn't come back with fire, and all that kind of stuff was kind of like the gospel, and they pound that into you over and over. And if you're not selling, your comeback doesn't mean anything, and all that kind of stuff. But
I had the natural fire, but the learning how to set the stage, like you're talking about, for the comeback, and being able to go out there and keep the people on the edge of their seats and bringing them up, bringing them down, and you're almost going to give it to them. No, I'm not. I'm going to take it away from them. I'm going to make them, want more.
They'd always. I remember they'd always tell you there's a huge difference between dying and selling. Dying, just laying there and getting your ass kicked doesn't serve any purpose. But you're always going to look like you're trying to overcome, and they beat you back down, and you keep the flickering flame burning and getting the marks. Kind of thinking they're the wind beneath your wings and all that stuff.
Well, and I'll tell you how they set me up to practice it. And so I had two tag partners when I was in Florida. One was Scotty McGee, and the other one was Brad Armstrong. But Scott and I worked with a couple guys down there, the Royal Kangaroos. It was Don Kent and Bob somebody. I can't remember Bob's last name, but we were going 45-minute Broadways with these guys every night. And I was always the one to set it. I would always let them set the heavy heat on me, and I'd give Scotty to come back, and then we'd roll into whatever we were going to do to take it home to the finish. But when you're out there that long a match and you're fighting from the bottom up for 15, 20, and 30 minutes of 45, you really find out what it's all about digging in and knowing. Because that's the hardest work of the whole thing, as you know. Is keeping that excitement going and that tension for the people wanting that comeback and knowing that you're still in that contest. And that was just one of the greatest educations anybody ever gave me in the business. It was priceless, and I've never been able to go on to do the things I did later had I not had that base and that foundation laid out on me like they did there in Florida.
Scott McGee's kind of one of those guys that's been lost to time a little bit. What was that man like?
Scott was awesome. His dad was Jeff he was second generation. Yeah. So Jeff Ford. I never met his dad, but Scotty was he was a classic technical wrestler. My gosh, he was just so good, and such a great partner for me to have just because of his solid technical skills and his ease in the ring, and he was much more seasoned than I was, and it was just a great experience. I even when I went to work for Bill, I tried to stay in touch with Scotty, and I kept trying to open a door for him and get him to be able to follow behind me, and it just never happened. And I believe Scotty went back to school and got his nursing license or something.
He came up. He was working Calgary, Terry, up, and he had a huge influence on my brother Owen and Brian Pillman and Chris Benoit and those guys. And when he was working, this would have been about 86 or so, and he had a brain aneurysm or something like that, and he almost died. And then I don't think he ever wrestled after that. It was.
Well, that's tragic. I didn't know that.
He also held the tag belts with Brad Anderson back then too.
You mean the Armstrong?
Excuse me. Sorry. What was Brad like at all?
And Brad was, he was just so full of fire and excitement and this real smooth moving guy that it was. He was. I mean, he could do all the technical type wrestling to be sure, but he had a different flair about him. So he was exciting to be partnered up with, and we trained together at the gym there in the Powerhouse Gym, I think it was in Tampa back then, and it was funny because Kevin Sullivan and Purple Haze and I'm trying to think who all else. We all trained at the same gym. And they used to call us the Young Lions because we were busting it hard back then, just trying to be as big and strong as we could, and of course move up the ladder. But we're working with Jake Roberts and Kevin and these different guys all over Florida, and it was quite a camaraderie.
And then sometime in the summer of '83, you went and worked up in Mid-South.
Exactly, and that's where I got my break. So one day, one night in the middle of the night, I get this call from Ernie Ladd, and Ernie was booking for Bill, and Ernie had met me at he'd come into Florida working shots, and we talked, and Paul Orndorff had just left Bill and gone to the WWE, where it was a WWF back then. So they had a gaping hole in their system, and they were. Had a spot wide open for a top babyface. So I said, he said, you want a shot at this? And I said, sure. So I left, and Dusty blessed it, and I had this. So I had this thing in my back pocket that Andre the Giant had gave me, because one night over breakfast, he had said, and because we maintained our friendship that we started in Portland, and he was in Florida. And he said, you look a lot like that Tom Selleck guy, that Magnum TA. He said, you should be Magnum TA. And I said, man, that's got a ring to it. I didn't know what that meant, didn't know what that character would look like or anything else, but I said, if I ever get a break, if I get a chance to be somebody, that's what I'm going to do. And the intent was, this was when Vince Sr. was still living. Andre was going back and forth and working in the gardens and working, for Vince too. And he was going back to talk to Vince Sr. about bringing me to WWF. But before he could get the deal done, Ernie calls and offers me the deal to come there. So I go, and again, I've got this name, Magnum TA, we're going to use, and I got a finish I'm going to use, because I had found through working the School of Hard Knocks that whatever finish you had, you better be able to do it to anybody. Because you're going to work with a bunch of guys that sometimes can't walk and chew gum at the same time, and they can make you look pretty bad if they can't take your finish. So I realized that I had this really strong lower back and hip strength, and that I could belly-to-belly suplex anybody I could get my arms around. And I took that on as my finishing maneuver. I went to work for Bill, and it started off, I mean, they gave me a push, and me working with Jim Duggan as tag partner, and we were chasing the tag team championship, which we held together there for a little while, and all kind of things. But they really just couldn't sink their teeth into what my persona was, because they're kind of directing it, right? So, like, one week they want me looking like I'm in Brooks Brothers suits, and then the next go around they said, nah, that doesn't look right. Well, they decided they want me looking like I was some kind of punk rocker, and it was really frustrating because I didn't know what to do because I never worked on top. I didn't have any problem standing in front of the mic and talking, but I didn't have like a direction to kind of sink my teeth into. After about 6 months of this going on, they were like, Ernie was like, I'm not sure this is working. This really working out just like we thought, and maybe you ought to go do something else for a little while and come back to us later. And I'm going, well, that's cool because I've been talking with Dusty anyway, and Dusty had this idea. He said, look, he knew I'd always ridden motorcycles my whole life. He said, get you a Harley, and he said, get you a leather jacket, and we're going to bring you back here, Magnum TA, the Lone Wolf, Magnum TA, back to Florida. I said, that's really cool. That's great. I'm going to do it. And I went down to Baton Rouge Harley Davidson, bought me a brand spanking new 1983 Harley Davidson, and bought me a leather jacket, and I drove it down to the town because I was working with Duggan that night in a tag match. And I drove that motorcycle into the town, and I had that leather jacket on, and I came in the dressing room, and you could see everybody looking at me funny. And it was like a light bulb going off. And all of a sudden, everybody saw me in a completely different light because I'm on this motorcycle, and I got this bad boy image-looking thing going on. And next thing I know, Bill, who I really hadn't spent any time with in the 6 months I've been there, comes out and says, he said, hey, kid, he said, we got big plans for you. You're not going anywhere. And I bought this bike, and I'm ready to go back to Florida. And he brought Bill Dundee in as the booker, and they turned that territory around on its ear. And they put me in a program with Mr. Wrestling 2, and next thing I know, we're selling out every little stinking place we go to in Mid-South, and the world was on fire. And I was getting to work on top, and I finally found a comfort zone in this Magnum TA persona, and I wasn't like the little cutesy baby face. I was able to be kind of this bad boy baby face character, which I was much more comfortable with, and it just took off like a rocket.
And some of the people you were working with down there at that time in Mid-South were like Jim Neidhart, who Bruce happens to know, strangely enough. Jimmy Garvin was around back then. Butch Reed was down there. Kamala, I think the original Kamala. Midnight Express, and tons of guys. But I had a fan want me to ask you, Terry, about if you recall a one-shot you did in Georgia at the Omni on Thanksgiving Day of 1983. They had a big tag team tournament where, of all people, you and Randy Savage formed a tag team, which I'm amazed that was never put together again somewhere else in the future, because that seems like a pretty hot tag team.
We had never met, and Ole brought the dog and myself and Butch Reed in to this one night thing they were doing every year, and they put Randy and I together, and we just had, it was flipping insane. We were quite the duo, but neither one of us were working the territory. Yeah, we had come in for the deal to help out. Mm-hmm. and spice up the card. And him and I end up working all the way through till the finals. And then we were working the heel tag team. It was Pez Watley and somebody, and
Butch Reed.
And I did and Butch Reed, and I did the favor for Pez. And I remember because I remember everybody was all wigged out to talk about because I was like the North American champion or something at the time, and they were like, dude. I said, man, that's fine. I mean, this was before cable TV and the internet and all this stuff. I mean, I didn't mind putting somebody over. It's daggone work. I mean, these guys are there making their bread and butter and their living. I mean, if I could help make somebody and get some heat on them, that was the least I could do. So so Randy and I, had our one time together and worked that tournament, and then I put Pez over in the finals and went home. That was it.
And a month later, you were in a big cage match there in New Orleans. You and Mr. Wrestling 2 as your partner against Butch Reed and Jim Neidhart. Can you tell us a little bit about how that feud built up?
Well,
and what those guys were like to work with?
Yeah, Jim Neidhart was flipping, young and strong as anybody I ever grabbed in my life. And I got to give a caveat to that too. We also had Steve Dr. Death Williams in the territory breaking in at the same time. So we had quite a group of people, there. But that's another story in a minute.
The word crowbar kind of comes to mind.
It redefines. I'll tell you a funny story about that in a minute. But anyway, yeah. So working with Jim Neidhart, who was young and just hadn't been in the business that long either at the time, he was excellent. And I'd already had a long single program with Butch because him and I had worked probably 3-4 months at a time every night together. So we were like peas and carrots. We had our deal together, and then when Neidhart came in, he was like the executioner part of that group. He was just a madman. He was so powerful. But they were absolutely an awesome duo and a pleasure to work with, and great professionals and people I have just a lot of great memories of.
Bob here. Listen, I've got an old friend of yours on the calling in right now. I'll bring him on. He wanted to say hello. You guys can talk for a couple of minutes. I'd like to welcome an old friend of yours, Terry, Mr. JJ Dillon. Welcome, JJ.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Great to hear from you, JJ.
Can you hear me?
Appreciate your joining us.
JJ, it's always good to hear your voice.
I've been sitting back for about 10 minutes just listening to Terry, and I've been enjoying the stories. A lot about his background and how he got started. Which is not unusual in the business. It's one of those subjects that we never ever sit down and seem to get into a conversation about. So I've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
Well, how did you guys first hook up, JJ, and what was your earliest involvement with Magnum?
I guess that would have been in Charlotte, Dusty. And if it was prior to that, it escapes my memory. As while time goes by, it seems like your ability to remember details about the past seems to deteriorate with it. But my most vivid memories are, when he was in Charlotte and we were there, and he was on fire. He had an incredible future ahead of him, and really had his. He was really established, and like he said earlier, I didn't know, and a lot of things evolve in this business, and you just have to look at The Rock about how, as talented as he is, how he started, and the fans booed him out of the place because it was just something that they couldn't relate to, and but by the time I got to be around Terry, he was very comfortable in what he was doing, and to me that was Magnum TA. That's all I knew.
Were you guys doing the?
Hey JJ, I'll refresh your memory for a minute. Something that you don't remember. So we actually worked in the ring together in Florida. When right. you and I have been in the ring together, and so it was. So for me, when I came to the Crockett's and saw you in the role as the manager and that whole thing, I knew you as a in the ring persona. So that was and that went way back. So it was like early 80s when I was working there for Mike and Eddie. You were actually down there for a short time. Must have just been coming in and out. But like you and Hiro Matsuda and a couple of guys I got the honor of working with when I was green rookie. it probably wasn't as memorable for you as it was for me.
Well, I'm known mainly associated with my years as the leader of the Four Horsemen, which was certainly the pinnacle of my career. But people that aren't familiar with my career, which my active career as a wrestler/manager, and the first 5 years I was a full-time wrestler before I ever got a call from Archie Goldie, and that opened a whole new door and never looked back from it. But I always had that wrestling experience to fall back on whenever that came into play. So when my career ended, I actually had over 3,200 matches. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that we were in the ring at some point earlier. So I feel honored that that I had a chance to wrestle you.
Thank you.
Did you ever work against the Horseman, Terry, or did that intersect when you were in Crockett's territory or whatever?
I was. Dusty and I were in countless matches with Ole and Arn and Tully and Rick and just round and round. As a matter of fact, at the time when I had the accident in 1986, there was a lot of people just thought it was an angle. Thought that the Andersons had jumped me or caused the wreck or done something, like it was something that was going to, I was going to be this big comeback from and all this stuff. They did, because they did some really dastardly things to people, back then that we depicted on television, and so they didn't know whether the whole thing was a staged up deal or not until the weeks and weeks went on, and it was pretty obvious I was in Charlotte Memorial Hospital, and the news media and all that stuff was part of it. But it was those guys were just, I was part of that original deal with Ole and Arn and Tully and Rick, with Dusty and I, and some matching with Road Warriors and different things. It was, I was there for the infancy of that.
I'd like to go back for just a second to Mid-South one more time, because I know you and Mr. Wrestling 2, you held the tag titles together. Then you guys split up. Can you tell us a little bit about the split and how you guys feuded over the North American title?
It was a great angle in that Wrestling 2 had never been a heel. They had this idea that they worked this thing with him as my coach. Is how it all started. He was coaching me, and he was showing me some of his expertise of things that he had mastered over the years, and so we had our run as a tag team champions. But they did this deal where I was going to become the number one contender for the North American heavyweight title, and they had to bow up about it a little bit, like he was jealous. Like, why is this whippersnapper getting this opportunity? I'm the the stud here should be getting the shot at the title, not him. And the original deal, which Jim Ross shared with me, was that Bill wanted to turn me heel on 2, but Jim really persisted in the behalf of keeping me a babyface and said, "No, I really think we're missing the boat." And Johnny had never worked anything but babyface, so that was a real big stretch. So they had him turn heel, and he turned heel on Dog, and took the title from Dog, and it was a really just crazy ride, because he was having difficulty, because he was used to working like he had to work under the mask, and he had all these things that he had done historically, just used to work in a certain style, and a heel's totally different. So it was awkward for him being a heel, and we ended up going to the program. He drops the belt to me, and just as he was starting to really get it and feel comfortable in the psychology of being the heel, Bill pulled the plug on him. And it was a shame, because Bill was ready to go another direction and put me in a program with Ernie Ladd instead, and which was all fine, but it was a shame, because 2 really probably had some more mileage in his career than he got out of it, because he really was a good heel and had some great stuff to offer in that capacity, but like I said, didn't didn't get to realize all the fruit out of that he should have.
Terry, did you ever take the big knee?
Yeah, the big smack on your back. Yes. Yeah,
that's the one.
Right, yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, I took it because that big pop that you heard was him smacking you on the back with that big open palm, and and you're trying to sell your chest. You're supposed to take this big knee lift, and your back feels like you just got hit by broadsided by I don't know what, and it was almost comical because you wanted to sell the wrong part of your body, but it was I took the big knee, and I had the honor of taking it.
It was over.
Yeah. He had it over. He could aim it at you and everybody popped.
Now I know the last two big matches you had. One in the summer of '84 was a no disqualification match against Ted DiBiase at the Superdome there in New Orleans. Do you have any recollection of that match and how they built up to that?
Not specifically that match. Just I remember the guys that really stood out as being like on a different playing field. And in Ted DiBiase, and this is before I'd worked with Flair. So at that time, Ted DiBiase was the most polished and smooth top hand that I'd ever worked with. And I mean, and I'm not taking anything away from Butch Reed, different guys that I worked with, because they were all awesome, and of course I potatoed all of them. But something about Ted, I knew that he was destined to be like a superstar, and he was super easy to work with. Made it like it was a night off, and I would have loved to have gotten the chance to work with him down the road, later on in my career, had I had the opportunity.
And then from there, in December of 1984, you made your way to the Crockett's in Mid-Atlantic. And it seems like by the summer of '85, at the big Golden Anniversary show there at the Greensboro Coliseum, they had you go over in a 20-man battle royal, and it seems like that's maybe where it all really started to culminate for Magnum TA, and the big push started to happen at that moment. Is that accurate?
Well, Dusty pushed me to the moon from the word go. The thing that turned it on was TBS, and I think JJ will have to agree. The minute we hit the Superstation and we hit that venue all over the world, everything changed. Everything changed right then and there, almost by the minute. It changed the whole tide of the effort in what we were doing. So the battle, I remember Dusty putting me over in Battle Royal because I remember trying to explain to my granddaddy, who thought I'd won $50,000, how I had reinvested something back with the company. because obviously I didn't have the $50K, but it was really magic from the moment we hit that Superstation, watching what happened and how it unfolded, because it impacted people's perception of our product almost instantly.
And you had a pretty good little run there with Tully Blanchard, feuding over the television title there. Had you and Tully worked together before down in Southwest at his dad's promotion? Yeah,
we did, and we had the feud we had was he wasn't the television champion when him and I had the feud. I was the U.S. champion, and I won it from Wahoo initially, and then he and I get in this battle, and he has Baby Doll was his valet, and Baby Doll came down to a match dressed as a police officer, so she was like undercover, and comes down to the ringside and sold out Charlotte Coliseum and slips him a roll of quarters, which he proceeds to knock me out with, and wins the U.S. title. And you could have heard a pin drop. The heat was like nothing I'd ever seen in the building. And him and I had a program that lasted, I don't know how many months, but it was the most intense single feud I'd ever been part of, and it culminated in the I Quit match that we had in Starrcade '85 in a steel cage that has become somewhat infamous in steel cage matches in history.
one of the scariest moments in my career, and this is after the accident, and you came back and just people marveled at the fact that you were able to still move around and get around, and obviously the fans hadn't forgotten you. And at that particular match, I think it was Dusty wanted to get Tully in the ring so bad that he it was a deal where, well, if you want him, then you're going to have to pay for that opportunity. And there was a big grocery bag, which now they got plastic bags, but the big grocery bag was stuffed full of cash money, and you were going to be the one that was to guard them, bring the money down and to guard the money at ringside. And when we got ready to go home, you were distracted for a second, and I shoved you, and down you went, and I grabbed that sack of money and ran for my life up the aisle, and I thought there was a car waiting at the back door, and I thought, I wonder what the chances are that I'm even going to make it to the back door without getting killed, but somehow I did jump in the car, and off we went. And that was one of the scariest moments of my night, the fact that you coming back from the injury, that I had the nerve to shove you down and grab that sack of money. And I do remember looking over my shoulder with you unable to run after me, but making the effort. And Dusty saw what happened. He came after you, got counted out, and lost the match.
Yep, I remember. And I wondered the same thing. I wondered how fast you could run and could you really get out of there before somebody got you.
It's the fastest I ever ran in my life. Trust me when I tell you that.
Yeah, it was a good day not to have a knee blowout.
And kind of after all that, you had the infamous Best of 7 series with Nikita Koloff. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was, and I do some events around here and there, and Nikita and I have been able to spend some time together here in the last couple of weeks, and it's funny that what kind of impact that had on so many people, because that was back when the Russian heel thing was really had some pretty significant heat, and they had really gotten Nikita on fire as a heel, and he had really raised his game up, and it was my first opportunity working in a program where I was the veteran in the ring, because Nikita had been in the business really a very short time and had been mostly in matches where he was in tag matches with Ivan Koloff or Barry Darso or somebody where he had other people around him that could kind of put the time in and make up the meat of the match. But I find myself in the singles program with Nikita, and it was to me it was a test for me, because I wanted to see, could I be the leader in a situation, be the veteran, and have the caliber main event matches that this was going to be supposed to happen for the wrestling fan, and live up to the expectation. So it was brutal. Nikita was as intense as I was as a babyface. He was equally as intense as a heel, and he was totally dedicated to portraying that character and that monster that he was. And it was magic. We had some 30 and 45-minute matches, and it was something I'm very proud of.
And what was that eventually going to build to? Because that was just prior to the car accident. What were the original plans there, Terry?
Well, the plan was a world title. I mean, the plan period was the NWA world title. I had been to New York with Dusty and Jim Crockett, and they told me what they wanted to do. They hadn't told me when we were going to do it, but they wanted to put the belt on me, and so I didn't need the U.S. title to go back and do a program with Rick, but it made sense to take Nikita to that next level with that heat and that title. And so, the plan was that eventually, and I don't know where that was going to be, that I would get back into the feud with Rick and take the world title.
I just want to tell you, it was great to see you in Waterloo last year at the Dan Gable Museum for the Trago Stays Hall of Fame, and I know that you had to drive all the way out there, and it gave us a chance to spend a few days together, and what a marvelous place it is out there. at the Dan Gable Museum, and I'm going again this year in July, and I'm hoping there's a chance you'll come back this year.
Well, there's certainly a chance, and nobody should go through their life and not experience that at least once. That's for sure. It was an honor to be able to go out there and meet those guys, shake hands with Dan Gable, and see that museum. I just had no idea there was that much history from professional and amateur wrestling all contained in one building anywhere. That was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Yeah, every wrestling fan should have that one on their bucket list. The Traegos Fez Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, which is part of the Dan Gable Museum in Waterloo, Iowa. But best of luck to you, Terry. I'll see you down the line, my friend.
All right, take care, my friend.
Kyle Wagner from Green Bay, Wisconsin. He's a big fan of yours. He saw you down at Waterloo, Iowa. Good friend of Hart Beat Radio. And Kyle wanted to know if you could list the top 3 guys you've wrestled in NWA.
Oh, okay. Well, say NWA. I'll take that. Well, Rick, of course, being the champ, he had to be the first, and Tully would be the second, and just because of the memories we made, I'd have to say Nikita.
Pierre from New York said he served in Afghanistan. He was in a serious accident over there, and he wanted to say how much he appreciates your words of inspiration. You helped him overcome his disabilities, Terry, and
for me, I've dealt with this debilitating injury for about 30 years now, a little over 30 years, and we can always, no matter who we are, there's always things we've got that we can look at where we got unmet expectations in our life for things we wish we could do, can't do. But I have really done my utmost to try to, find the positives in being the best that I can personally be with the capabilities I have every day. And my whole goal from the get-go was when this accident took place, I really never understood the impact we had on so many people across the world until I had this career-ending injury. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that because of the wrestling business, I'd had this opportunity to live out this life of, portraying a hero and an overcomer and a John Wayne type character like the heroes I grew up watching when I was a kid. And that now it was kind of like the rubber meeting the asphalt. Was I going to, crawl up inside of a pill bottle or a whiskey bottle and say, woe is me the rest of my life? Or was I going to, try to apply some of the same principles I'd use to, reach my goals in wrestling and life and show people that you can go on and be successful or find happiness no matter what cards are dealt to you. And I said to myself, for all those folks that have watched and I've entertained, now this is a real life challenge. And I'm not going to be a quitter. I'm not going to give up. And I'm going to show people that no matter how tough the cards are you're dealt, you can persevere, you can find a way, and you can still be a contributor and be a positive impact in the world. And honestly, that's the greatest gift that I could ever try to give back to others, is that not to fold and not to give up, no matter what, because we all got something to contribute. And whether we realize it or not, there's people all around us watching us and how we handle the challenges we've got every day. You might not be talking to them, you might not even know their name, but when they see you doing something that they can't even imagine how you're overcoming it or dealing with it or going on about your day, it has an influence. So we all have that capability. I just happen to have a different platform because I was on this internationally televised wrestling program and reached a whole lot of people on a lot of different levels. But we all have that impact in our day-to-day life. And, that's the message I want to convey to anyone, is that there's never something that's too much. You can still find a way. You just can't quit.
Can I ask you, Terry, about the night of the accident, October 14th, 1986? I know you wrestled a match against Jimmy Garvin, and then you left to drop off Dick Murdoch, from what I've read.
Yeah. What happened, we came back to Charlotte, and he rode down and back with me, and then we stopped at one watering hole somewhere, and he ended up hooking up with some guys and going over to another place. And so I had his bag in my car, and I went over to where he was and gave him his bag and said, "Hey, I'll see you later," and all's good, and drove off. And I was about literally a mile and a half away from my house, and it was pouring down rain so hard you couldn't hardly see. And I had this 911 Turbo Porsche. It was like my dream car. I always wanted from the time I was a kid, and I only had the car like 3 or 4 months. And I had the car. The Porsche people had lowered the car for me, and when they did, they didn't readjust the camber of the tires, and the tires had worn out from about 3/4 of the way across from the inside out. So if you stand on the outside of the car, you look like you had all kind of tread. But if you looked underneath, the tire was like worn out because it was set up wrong. When I hit a bad patch of water, and the car just hydroplaned like terrible, like I had no contact with the road at all. And when I tried to adjust it, recover it, whatever, anyway, I couldn't. And I ended up hitting a telephone pole sideways at the speed of probably like 50 miles an hour. And the blow, I was so big in this little car that when I drove the car, my shoulder was always almost up to next to the door, and I didn't have enough headroom in the car as it was. I had to lean the seat back to drive it, and I could just barely put my hand between my head and the roof. And when I hit the telephone pole, I hit it so hard that the blow took me up into the roof, and my C5 vertebrae exploded. Just exploded like a hand grenade had gone off. And I mean, splinters went into my spine, and my disc was like an L shape up against my cord. It was horrible. But the blow it didn't knock me out. It just knocked me over in the car. And it was just really surreal because I was laying down sideways in the floor of the car, and I couldn't move. And I knew something was, it was completely, discombobulated. Obviously, I had this horrendous head blow, but it didn't knock me out. But I knew I couldn't move, and I knew somehow my instinct was that I couldn't panic either, because I felt like if I couldn't tell somebody how bad I was hurt, that it could be even worse. And I laid there for, I don't know how long. Everybody's saying it's probably about an hour before somebody found me. And they took me to Charlotte Memorial Hospital and diagnosed me as having a C5 spinal injury. I was paralyzed from the neck down. And I was told, basically at that time that I had like 1,000,000 shot of ever walking again. So they gave me an option of having what's called a spinal decompression surgery done, and this was kind of a very aggressive type approach for 1986. Back then, they would usually put you like in a halo frame type thing and try to stabilize you and do all these things before they do anything invasive. But I said, go for it. You're basically telling me I'm dead. So, see what you can do to make it better. And they did. They went in and they did the surgery. Before the surgery, I couldn't move anything but my head. When I woke up after the surgery, I could move my left arm just a little bit. That was the only thing I could do. So I ended up 5 months in the hospital, and slowly I started getting some return back in my left arm, my left hand, then my left leg, then a little bit in my right leg, and very little in my right arm. But I was able to walk out of the hospital under my own power on my own 2 feet 5 months after they told me I'd probably never walk again.
And and what's interesting there is that accident is what kind of propelled Nikita Koloff to do his face turn. What was that like? That had to have been so bizarre to have to lay there and see that happen. Do you have any memories of that?
Oh goodness! I got memories that I wish I didn't have memories of. I was in this thing called a rotokinetic bed, and it turned like a giant cradle left to right nonstop. Because when you're paralyzed, one of the worst things that can happen is you get blood clots, and which can obviously kill you. So they had this. So I had this friend, Jackie Crockett, one of the Crockett brothers, that rigged a television up that rotated with me. It was attached to the frame of the bed, so I could see the news on like nonstop on my little TV. And like it seemed like, because of the medication they had me on, it seemed like the news came on like every 15 seconds. But they would keep flashing up my car wreck, showing the car, news updates on me, all this stuff. And then I would get to see the wrestling programs too. And Dusty told me, he said, I got this idea because he and I were supposed to be in this match with Gene and Arn in a steel cage. He said, I got this idea to turn Nikita babyface. What do you think? And I said, I think they'll go crazy. And so I watched it happen, and it did. It went crazy. But that was crazy. But the crazier thing even yet was that this is 1986 before pay-per-view had gone crazy. So I laid literally in this bed and was in this hospital for 5 months. And I watched the wrestling business go from a paid arena attendance bonanza to pay-per-view, where the money went up linear. So I watched a top spot go from a couple $100,000 to a couple $1 million almost overnight, and that was a lot to swallow.
Man, I really bet. Geez.
Yeah. So talk about sitting and lamenting. If I look at lost income, and back then I only had a desire to wrestle till I was 30. I was 27 when I had this wreck. My plan wasn't to wrestle till I was 50 years old. My plan was to wrestle till 30, and then I wanted to go drive NASCARs. I love racing. I was totally enthralled. I had a chance to drive Benny Parsons' race car when he raced for the Copenhagen team, and NASCAR was all about it. This was before Jeff Gordon and all that. There was a big tie-in with wrestling and NASCAR, and they were all about it. And I wanted to go race cars. So I wanted to win the world title, have a year or so run, and go out while I was still on top of my game and go race cars. But if you think about it, as it changed, how many millions of dollars of potential lost income is that between 27 and say 40 years old?
Yeah, I'm very sorry all that happened to you, Terry.
Well, no, I don't say that you don't have to say you're sorry, but I just laugh because it's comical, because I'm in the real world now where, people out here fighting and busting it to try to make a six-figure income, much less ever even think of the possibility of seven figures. So, it keeps things in perspective. It keeps you a healthy perspective about, the real world and what everybody really goes through, in life. But I wouldn't change any of it for anything, because I love the experience I had. I love the friendships that I built during that time, and it's just hard to imagine the impact that it had on so many people, and the way the WWE Universe and their 24/7 programming has kept all of this alive and current in 2017. It's really crazy.
How long had it been before the internet era? Obviously you're out of the business come 1987. How long before you started noticing, like, oh my God, look at this whole new generation of people who know who I am and have followed my entire career, even though they weren't alive?
It took it about 10 years for me to figure it out that it had impacted people, and those people had grown up and they'd had kids and they'd told their kids about it, and they were bringing their kids into these fan fests and stuff and saying, look, this is so and so that I watched when I was your age and blah 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 blah. It's like it started taking on a different aspect then, and then the internet and YouTube, and oh my gosh. Yes, it's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. I'm thankful.
What have you been doing since you got back on your feet? Yes, sir.
Let me say this first. I'm really, really, really thankful, though, that they didn't have cell phones and all the abilities we have today to capture things on video, or none of us would have made it. we would have never survived.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think the internet and all that's, it's kind of a fine line, but in a lot of ways, it's been more detrimental to the business than beneficial to it. I think, a lot of pros and cons, I guess, But
I think the internet is going to do a lot for the business here as the years progress. Look at all the history that's been able to be preserved because of the internet. That would have, you're talking about guys like Luther Lindsay. We talk about him all the time, Bruce. If it wasn't for the internet, people wouldn't even know who he was.
No, I think it's like anything else. If it's used for the good purposes, it can and should be of great benefit, and the downside is the bullshit, planting, people with vendettas and smart marks and all that stuff.
Well, the thing is, you can't get any mileage out of anything anymore. I mean, we'd work an angle and run for months and months because we could take that then to every town that we visited, and it was fresh for those people getting to see it live.
Oh, yeah. I shudder at the thought of, back in the day, you'd bring a guy in from the States, hot new heel or something like that, and you could say or make him out to be whatever you wanted and have all this. But nowadays, everybody knows everything about everybody under the sun to the point where you're kind of, compromised by that. But I guess you just got to keep working around it or finding ways to use it to your advantage and all of that,
Well, the boys can benefit from it because, like my stepdaughter is Tessa Blanchard, and her boyfriend.
Yeah, how's she doing?
She's doing awesome. She's over in England shooting a movie they're doing a story on Paige's family and her life growing up in the wrestling business, and Tessa is doing the in-ring piece of her wrestling career.
I'm surprised. Terry. Cause I met Tessa down there with you last summer in Iowa, and she seemed to have a awesome personality and a look and everything. But I'm surprised they haven't done an angle or tied some storyline in with she and Charlotte Flair. Given the Horseman thing, and it would seem to me like a logical, perfect angle where she came in and you cooked something with her and Charlotte, and they could either be old friends or there could be some kind of reason for them to be enemies or something like that. But it would seem to me like
it's her age. WWE doesn't like bringing in young girls, and Tessa's just 21 years old. So she broke in when she was like 19 and a half.
You'd figure 21 would be the perfect age, rather than Mae Young.
For me, absolutely. From the drama perspective.
Yeah, I think they were dragging Moolah and Mae Young around.
Well, you got to remember though that when you guys were working, by the time you were 21, you'd already had 600 matches, 900 matches. Tessa's lucky if she's probably had 300 matches by now.
As my dad used to say, youth must be served, It would seem to be a 21-year-old, nice-looking girl with some, all the tools. Should be the perfect time for her to be getting the push, No need to wait till she's 30 or something like that,
No. My hope is she went down and did an actual trial at the Performance Center a year ago. I mean, they've looked at her. But she'd only been, she probably only had 20, 30 matches when they looked at her. And, I mean, they just wanted her to continue getting ring time. To me, I'm like you. I would have put her under contract and developed her the way I wanted to develop her is what I would have done. And
truth be known, she's got a huge inside track growing up in the business, growing up around people. She knows all the ins and outs about the psychology, the sell, how to market herself, and all that other. It would seem to me that she would be, a prime candidate because most of the girls that they have down there, not to be knocking them, but most of them don't have that much wrestling acumen that I could see. A lot of them are just kind of in there because they look good, or they got, some aesthetic appeal, but she would seem to me a hot commodity, just like Charlotte. Charlotte's got kind of the inside track, just having grown up around it. She sort of understands how to get over and play her role and all of that, and I'm sure Tessa's got the same kind of inside track there,
Yeah, and Charlotte got to work with Dusty at the developmental center for a long time when he was there, and I talked with him about her, and Reed's death had a really heavy impact on her, and it was really hard for her to even think about cutting promos or doing anything and trying to come out as a character. But she had some real strong people invest in her to help her develop her persona like she has, and obviously she's turning into going to be somebody really make a mark on the business, and Tessa will absolutely be there because she is committed, dedicated, doesn't expect any handouts. She's out there busting.
Yeah, she seems like
she'll get a chance.
She seems like a real nice person too. Like pretty grounded, not a mark for herself or not under any illusions. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I trained a lot of the girls up here back down in the dungeon, and we always had the girls training with guys, bumping guys and doing all like that. It, gave them a lot more kind of, they were a lot less fragile and all like that, You have guys bumping and flying for them, and, I know my niece, Natalia, she kind of learned through that, and she's done all right, But
I'm so proud of her. When Jim was in Mid-South with me, she was just a baby. And I remember him talking about what a little powerhouse she was when she was just a little thing. And so that was so cool. I mean, it's so cool. When I met her in a match here in Charlotte back, oh gosh, I can't, it must have been 10 years ago or so now. And I just remember looking at her because I'd seen her when she wasn't knee-high to a duck. And now she's, in the ring, and I'm going, are you kidding me? It's fucking crazy. I mean, I'm 58. I'm 57. I'll be 58 in June, but I felt like I was about 100.
I was going to say here, Terry, I've got a caller here from Carmine in Oklahoma City. He said, ask Terry about Cody Rhodes. He understands that Cody you're his godfather.
Yes, I am. I'm Cody's godfather. I was there when he was christened, and I couldn't be more proud of Cody and what he's accomplished in the business. I mean, he's just he's cut out the same sheet of cloth as his dad, and he's a man's man, and he wasn't happy with the direction they were going with his character, and decided to go out and try it on his own, and he's out there killing it, man. He's out there making a lot of waves in the indie circuit, and working with guys like Kurt Angle, and just doing some phenomenal stuff. So I think we'll see him again in that platform in the WWE, and hopefully not with some painted up character, being able to be Cody Rhodes, which is what he wants to do.
So what the heck have you been doing since then, Terry?
Oh, just messing around. I'm a dad of three children biologically and 7 by marriage. I married Tully Blanchard's ex-wife, who at that time had already had 4 children with Tully that were 1, 3, 5, and 7 when she and I got together. And so Tully and I have been tied at the hip despite anything, and in co-parenting all these kids together. And my wife and I have our youngest are 9-year-old twins. They're in the 3rd grade, so I've got them from 25 down to 9. And
how many of them are going to be wrestlers?
Well, I know Tessa's already in, and I know that my youngest son Tucker is totally into it, and that wouldn't surprise me at all if he were to dive in. And the rest of them, I think, are all kind of heading out in different directions. But I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of them didn't end up taking a few bumps around.
We're just
if they got to spend a minute in the dungeon, they might not want to. But if they,
I know Bruce and I were.
I don't feel my arms hurt.
Yeah. I've heard all those stories. I used to, it was so funny. JYD used to talk about it all the time. I don't know what tie he had with up there, but he talked about Stu all the time, and he certainly, we appreciate the history of everybody that tried to protect the business and bring people in the right way and then teach them how to do things right. It was pretty cool lineage.
Not enough.
Have some discipline. Have some discipline.
Yeah, that. Yeah, a little of that. Yeah, stress doesn't need you yawn when you get out of bed in the morning.
And I know the folks at highspots.com just released a documentary on your life called I Never Quit, the Magnum TA story. It was just released this last fall. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
They really did some amazing work with that piece. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but they've got footage on there from all kinds of folks that I had no idea that they even interviewed. And they had some interviews on there from Dusty, which just was like so huge for me because of his and my relationship. And Jim Crockett's on there and Nikita and my mom, and it was a neat piece. When they came to me and said they wanted to do it, I said, I got to think about that for a minute because it's been like a really long time. I don't know that I can sit down and talk about this stuff for that long. but they did it. They did it very respectfully and made me feel at ease with it and kind of let me say what was on my mind. And they showed me some footage they had of a match that I had when I was just 6 months into the business with Bockwinkel. But I worked with him on a TV taping for Joe Blanchard, and it was funny because I remember the match so well because I was nervous as all get out. Now here I am, I'm going on TV where he was the AWA World Heavyweight Champion then, and moved the ring with him, and he lays the match all out for me, and he forgets to finish. He forgot to finish. And I thought it was so funny. I never forgot it because I said, well, you know what? It doesn't matter how long you've been in this thing, anybody can screw up. So it kind of it's kind of a good story, but they showed me that, and that's some good stuff, and it was a nice piece they put together.
How do you get on? If any of the listeners out there want to get a copy of that, or I assume they can go online somehow. And
they can just go to highspots.com and pick it up.
Absolutely.
Right there. They can stream it online.
What's it called? The title?
I Never Quit. The Magnum TA.
I Never Quit. Okay. Great. I was going to ask you, Terry, if you were giving advice to a young guy breaking into the business these days, what general advice would you give any of them?
Well, today, and back 30 years ago or 40 years ago, what it was like to try to get in the business, how hard it was.
Yeah.
Today, in today's time, just to say, okay, I want to be a professional wrestler. Well, you might as well say you want to play for the NFL or for the NBA or in the National Baseball League. When you make the commitment, you've got to realize what kind of commitment you're making because you want to be in an elite group of people that the opportunity has shrunk so much that there's not territories all over the United States. There's one major promotion in the world, and then there's a few minor promotions that are out there that are for real, but not where you can really make a living. But the competition has never been tougher because they actively recruit, world-class athletes right out of college now to see if they've got the right stuff, and a lot of them don't because it's that magic combination of ability and the unknown of charisma, which is something you can't teach. You either have it or you don't. And then in today's time, you top that with you've got to have acting chops because you've got to be able to take somebody else's words and make them your own. Because that's what they do. They're scripted. And so
and then you got to deal with all the politics too, which is sort of unrecognized by some. But you got to kind of go through the who's who and what's what down in WWE. I know that my niece and my nephew, that Harry, Davey Boy's son, they told me that was one of the toughest parts, is just kind of dealing with all the the politics, sort of the subtle little sometimes the backstabbing, the other little things, and you got to kind of understand some of that, otherwise you probably won't rise above it. But
no, if you want it, you've got to want it worse than error, and you've got to be willing to put in all the work and the sacrifice and everything comes with that, and that doesn't leave room for anybody but you in your world and pursuing that dream. There's nothing else that can come before that dream. And it's very unfortunate because it's not a family man's business or a woman's business. It's very much you're seeking to be successful in this industry that is so brutal and so competitive that to be one of those top percentage of people, you're going to sacrifice all and have some talent or potential to start with, or it's not going to be realistic for you.
I've got another caller. President of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Wichita Falls, Texas. I highly recommend. I'm going to be there again. Excellent. Welcome to Hart Beat Radio, Mr. Johnny Mantell.
Well, Bob, thank
Johnny,
you.
How are you?
I'm good, Bruce. I'm good. TA, how are you doing, man? Been a long time.
Man, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I'm in a good place in life, and helping with this Hall of Fame museum is keeping me talking wrestling every day, and since I've been around it for 50 years now, I guess that's the only thing I really know to do. So I'm really honored and privileged to be a part of it, and I'm sure glad to hear your story, and you're doing well, and I see pictures of you and your family on the internet all the time, and I'm so happy and proud for you.
Well, thank you very much. We're a big fraternity, and once you're in the fraternity, you're always in the fraternity, and no matter what other path you take in your life, this certainly walks side by side with you in everything that you do.
Absolutely, and I know I'll tell everybody that's listening today that every card I was ever on, and Magnum TA was in the main event, it was a full house. That's how important he was to this business.
Well, thank you. It was the thing of it was back then though, everybody that was on the card that night could have been a main event at some place on an arena, because we had talent stacked from the bottom to the top. It was absolutely unheard of. It was a super card every night.
It was the Louisiana territory in the late 70s, early 80s, the Dallas territory. They were just full from top to bottom. The main event or the opening match could exchange at any point in time, and so many talented men at that time in the business.
That's why we all watched each other, because we all appreciated what everybody brought to the table, and you could learn something from anything going on every night. There was always something that you could take away from it, and I was just honored to be in the company of so many good guys. It was really a special time, and I miss those friendships and that camaraderie. Honestly, I miss that more than being in the middle of the ring and getting all the accolades.
They used to tell me, Terry and Johnny, back in the day that you learned as much on the road just from those road trips, and there was always a few of those old veterans, and you'd be on, you know, a 500-mile trip to some place, and I remember that was some of the most productive periods when I just guys would be schooling you in the vans or the cars, you know, and it would be a captive audience, and you'd have some old guy like Harley or Nick Bockwinkel or some of those guys, and that's a big part of it that seems to be missing or not there, you know. But I remember you guys had pretty long road trips down in Louisiana and Oklahoma, I guess, you know. Probably
had long road trips, and you had Killer Carl Cox and Jerry Oates and Ted or TA or you know, the list just goes on. The Assassins as a tag team, or Akbar and the Medics when they were together,
and they always would be, you know, always schooling you, you know, and saying, you know, you got to slow down, or it'll take your time, or do this, you know. And I remember that was probably some of the best lessons I ever learned, was just in those long road trips, you know. And you have these guys, and they get really meticulous, and but that's something that I don't know that you'll ever see that again, but that was a huge part of it back in the day.
Yeah, I you know, guys like Grizzly Smith and who was with Bill back then. I remember one night he made me go back to the ring and make another comeback because I cut it short. He said, "You didn't get all that. Go back out there and get the rest of it." He had me go back out there and kick his butt for another 5 minutes, so I got all of it.
Oh yeah. Sometimes they weren't sugarcoating anything either, you know. I remember some of those old farts would, you know, get your effing ass out there, you know, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Bill Watts never sugarcoated anything. If he was going to tell you something, he just told you, right, TA?
Oh, yeah, and you know what? Everybody that I ever potatoed has got Bill Watts to thank for it, because he's the one that's taught me how to throw a punch. So I don't really have to say any more about that, do I?
Who was the guys when you started, Terry, that was in the car that treated you like that taught you like that? Who was the guys when you started?
The guys, I learned a lot before I got in the ring traveling with Jimmy Garvin. Jimmy would talk to me about the wrestling business in detail, because he loved it, and he'd been in it since he was really young. And so we had a good friendship, and he talked to me a lot about things that I just would have never known. And then you know, I guess the next, as far as the traveling piece, everybody would be second to Eddie Graham, because Eddie would put me up in the pilot seat next to him when he was flying his plane and talk to me about wrestling all the way to and all the way from when we were flying somewhere. So I mean, it was like it was a constant education when you were around people like that, and it was priceless. So I went and thanked Eddie when I got the opportunity when I come to work for the Crockett's, and I was down there for something, and I just told him, I said, you know, I just really want to thank you, because you gave me this immense education that I can never repay you for, that somebody couldn't go to school for, you couldn't go to a 4-year college, nothing, that what you shared with me, and you didn't have to, that laid the foundation for, you know, making this career that I'm now enjoying. And, you know, there's some special people out there like that.
Yeah, Jimmy's one of the class acts for sure that I know when he came to Dallas, after him and David had been in Florida together, they came and they had their program already worked out, planned to the T, and it was nothing but money.
Who were some of the guys, Johnny, that imparted stuff to you that made a lot of impact on you?
You know, it was probably Dory Funk when I was training in L.A. Really,
Dory Jr.
Dory Jr.
Dory
Jr. did a lot for me. Peter Maivia was so kind to me in my early days. And then the guys in the L.A. territory, I mean, that was, you know, sort of like we've already said, it was a who's who, a group. I mean, it was Butcher Bashan and my brother Ken and Piper and Victor Rivera, Pedro Morales, and Leo Garibaldi, who I think is probably one of the greatest minds in our business that a lot of people don't really talk about. And he would have long discussions with me on the way to Bakersfield and back about the psychology and the parts of the business that a lot of people don't really ever learn about, the tickets and the percentages and all those kind of things. And so I was so lucky to be around those kind of guys when I first started, and then to go to Louisiana at 18 and again be around Killer Carl Cox and Eric DeRed and Dick Murdoch and Jerry Oates and Bill Watts. Bill, sometimes if my car was parked in the northern end, sometimes much like Terry's saying, Bill would fly me out of the southern end of the territory up to the northern end back to get my car, and the entire trip, wouldn't be about my brother Kenny or my family. It'd be about wrestling and what he saw I did wrong and what I needed to work on and how to work on it. And those kind of like he said, those kind of educations are not you can't buy in a public setting anywhere. That's an education that you can only get from the great minds of the business, in
retrospect, you feel honored that they saw fit to, had enough faith in you or saw something in you to even impart it,
Humbled, man. You're just humbled by that opportunity to be in those settings at that time. I say it every day here at the museum that I'm so humbled to be a part of this business, and I was so lucky to be in the places that I was at the time I was at it. The Louisiana territory, the Dallas territory, L.A., Portland, going to Japan as many times as I went. Just so lucky to be able to do something.
I feel the same. I kind of grew up in it, but I was able to, sit there with old guys like Lou Thez and Strangler Lewis and Whipper Watsons and Peter Maivias and some of those guys, and you'd hear stories about stuff from like the 1920s and the 1930s and all these, everything had a reason, everything had a purpose whenever they were telling you, and it was, it's something that today's guys, that if there is any guys out there like you or Magnum that are, I'd certainly tell them, listen, have your ears and eyes open and your mouth shut and pick their brains, try to learn anything and everything you can from those people, because there's not enough people getting that message or being fortunate enough to get exposed to all those things,
Hey, I got a group coming in the museum, but I just wanted to call in and say hey to Magnum TA. It's been many, many years since I've seen him, and I hope to get him here to Wichita Falls one day and come see what we're doing and see what the Hall of Fame's all about.
Well, Johnny, thank you, man. It's so good to hear your voice. Take care.
Well, I just really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to learn more about your career before the days when you were wrestling for Jim Crockett. It's hard to find out the true history of professional wrestling nowadays. And that's not a dig at WWE. They're a business and they're there to make a profit, and they only own footage from certain territories, so that's what they're going to focus on. And I just really appreciate you being so open with us and helping us learn more about Portland wrestling and all the other places you went, from Florida to Mid-South, the one shot in Georgia on Thanksgiving. And it's nice to be able to help preserve your career a little bit more. So thanks for coming on today, sir.
Well, thank you, guys. Like I said, it's always an honor, and you guys are so professional, and thank you for holding me up in such a good light in front of all these wrestling fans. Thank you.